Picture this. It's Saturday morning.
Best time of the week.
Right. The coffee hasn't even started brewing yet. The house is just barely waking up. But there is a certain, very confident little dog who's already fully engaged.
Oh, they're on the clock.
Exactly. She's already completed her morning rounds. She has rigorously inspected the front hallway. She's monitored the garden gate through the living room window. And she is about to announce the arrival of a delivery truck outside, like 3 seconds before anyone in the house even hears the engine.
Sounds about right.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because that image perfectly encapsulates the absolute cognitive dissonance of owning a West Highland White Terrier, or, a Westie.
It really does.
You look at this adorable, small, fluffy white dog, and your brain just automatically defaults to assuming they are a passive lapdog. But what you actually have is this highly engineered independent contractor living in your house.
And that contractor has a very specific set of skills. Skills that don't necessarily align with, a modern, relaxed suburban lifestyle.
Right, which is why we're doing this deep dive today. We've got a huge stack of notes and insights here on breed behavior and care routines. And our mission is basically to bridge that gap, right, between the aesthetic appeal of a small, cute dog and the daily reality of living with a confident terrier.
Yeah, the dissonance you're talking about is exactly why we see so many friction points between these dogs and their owners. My goal today is to kind of connect the dots between those charming quirks and the actual biological reality of an animal that was fundamentally designed to hunt autonomously underground.
Because aesthetic appeal only gets you so far.
Right, exactly. It gets you nowhere when you're dealing with a working terrier's brain on a rainy Tuesday morning.
It's that working brain that just fascinates me in the source material. We have these notes that paint this picture of a dog that is cheerful, sure, and curious, but famously persistent.
Oh, incredibly persistent.
Like take the classic Westie head tilt. We see videos of it all the time. Someone brings in a mundane grocery bag and the dog tilts its head like it's analyzing, I don't know, some complex alien artifact.
And we interpret that as them being cute. Or confused.
Right. But biomechanically, the sources say they aren't performing for us at all. They are acoustically localizing.
Yes.
They are repositioning their ear flaps to pinpoint the exact origin, the pitch, the rustle of that bag. They're trying to determine if it contains something alive.
What's fascinating here is that it is entirely predatory calculation masked as endearing behavior, and that is the exact lens through which we have to view their entire personality.
The cute stuff is actually predator stuff.
Basically, yes. The courage, the humor, the independence, it all stems from their origin in the Scottish Highlands. I mean, they were bred to hunt badgers and foxes deep inside cairns.
Which are those tight, dark rock piles.
Right. Exactly. And think about it. When a dog is 50 feet underground, facing down a badger, they cannot look back at a human handler for instructions.
Yeah, there's no time to check in with the boss.
Right. They had to be selectively bred to make unilateral life or death decisions entirely on their own.
Which perfectly explains why they feel less like a needy pet and more like, I don't know, a hypervigilant neighborhood watch captain.
That's a great analogy.
But a specific kind of captain. Right. They aren't the anxiety-riddled security guard who checks the locks 10 times because they are scared. They are the seasoned detective who just implicitly trusts their own judgment. They have this genuine presence.
They absolutely do. It's a very attractive trait. But, and this is the crucial part, that same active, autonomous processing creates a major bottleneck for you, the owner.
How so?
Well, if they're...
Which brings us right into the daily realities outlined in the text. Things like barking at doors, barking at wildlife, or just vocalizing out of plain excitement. The sources state point blank that complete silence is just not a realistic promise with a Westie.
It's just not.
But, okay, I want to challenge this on behalf of the listener. Let's look at the physical environment. If I have a 10-pound dog with a massive surplus of energy, and I happen to have a half-acre fenced yard, why can't I just open the back door and let them self-regulate?
People ask this all the time.
Because biomechanically, they can reach full sprinting speed out there. Why doesn't that cardiovascular output just satisfy their needs?
Because you are conflating physical exhaustion with cognitive fulfillment.
Okay, break that down for me.
Sure. A yard is a static environment. Once the dog has mapped the perimeter, the olfactory inputs, the smells, they rarely change.
So they get bored of the smells.
Right. Cardiovascular exercise might tire their muscles, but it does absolutely nothing to engage their problem-solving brain. So when a Westie is left alone in a static yard, they aren't running perimeter laps to get fit.
Right, they aren't training for a marathon.
Exactly. They experience cognitive stagnation. And to relieve that intense boredom, they revert back to the job they were engineered for.
Which means they start excavating.
They start digging up your roses, yeah.
And this brings up one of the most brilliant practical compromises I found in the source material. Instead of trying to train the dog to completely suppress a centuries-old instinct, which sounds impossible, the notes suggest creating a permitted digging area.
Yes, I love this approach.
You basically build them a sandbox in the yard, bury some toys, and negotiate with the dog. It's this great acknowledgement that you can't erase the software. You just have to give the software a safe place to run.
It is a phenomenal example of environmental management. You are honoring the fixed action pattern of digging rather than just endlessly punishing it. But, and this is a big but, the yard presents another massive management issue.
Prey drive.
Yes, prey drive. Because a yard is an open ecosystem. It's static for the dog, but it is highly dynamic when it comes to passing wildlife.
So a squirrel on the fence.
Or a bird landing on the lawn, an unfamiliar cat passing through. These aren't just mild distractions. For a Westie, they are visual triggers that bypass the prefrontal cortex entirely.
Meaning they aren't actively choosing to ignore you when they see a squirrel. It's more like an involuntary reflex.
Precisely. It activates a closed-loop neurological system. Orient, stalk, chase, grab. And once that sequence is initiated by a visual trigger, it is exceptionally difficult to interrupt.
But wait, surely recall training works, right? If you spend months conditioning a really high-value recall word, shouldn't that override the instinct?
You would think so, but no. Recall training relies on the dog's ability to engage their prefrontal cortex, the logical, decision-making part of the brain. Okay.
When a terrier's prey drive is triggered, the amygdala essentially hijacks the brain. The logical center just shuts down.
Wow.
So your carefully trained recall word just becomes background noise to them. That is why the source material insists that secure fencing, checking your gates, and active real-time supervision are absolute non-negotiables.
You just cannot rely on behavioral training to reliably override a biological reflex in an unmanaged space.
You really can't.
That completely reframes the entire concept of a safe yard for me. And it makes me think about how this independent, reactive nature scales depending on where you live. Like the text mentions that apartment living can actually work, despite the dog's vocal tendencies.
Because size is deceiving.
Right. But the caveat is that an apartment forces the owner into a highly structured routine. Because of shared walls, you have no choice but to provide structured walks, dedicated outdoor sniffing time, and active barking management.
Yes, the environment demands structure. Ironically, having a massive house with a big yard might actually make you a lazier owner, which leads to a much worse behavioral outcome for the dog.
It creates a false sense of behavioral security. The physical environment only functions if the human routines within it are airtight.
So let's dive into those human routines, specifically family dynamics. Because based on the sources, a Westie doesn't view humans as masters. They must blindly obey. They view us more like roommates.
Roommates with a very loose grasp on the rules, usually.
Right. And if everyone in the house is playing by a different set of rules, the roommate situation falls apart. The household struggles way more than the dog does. Let's look at the stolen sock scenario mentioned in the notes.
Oh, the classic stolen sock.
Yes, a Westie steals a sock and retreats under the couch. If one person in the house tries to calmly trade a high-value treat for the sock, but then, say, a teenager in the house thinks it's funny to chase the dog and scream to get the sock back.
You have a major problem.
Right. You aren't just dealing with a poorly trained dog anymore. You are dealing with intermittent reinforcement.
Which is easily the most powerful psychological conditioning tool on the planet.
Exactly. You've essentially turned the dog into a gambler. The Westie learns that stealing a sock is literally a slot machine.
Yeah.
Sometimes you pull a lever and get a boring piece of cheese, but sometimes you pull the lever and get a highly stimulating, adrenaline-fueled chase game.
And to a terrier, both of those outcomes are massive jackpots.
So of course they are going to keep stealing socks. The failure isn't the dog's obedience. The failure is the human's inconsistency.
And that inconsistency becomes genuinely dangerous when we introduce children into the dynamic.
Let's talk about that.
We read that kids and Westies can genuinely mix well, but the boundaries enforced by the adults have to be rigid. The source text explicitly bans chasing, cornering, and careless lifting.
I want to stop on cornering for a second,
Mm-hmm.
because people think a dog growling when a child leans into its space is just the dog being grumpy. But considering what you said earlier about hunting badgers in tight rock crevices,
Mm-hmm.
a Westie's brain isn't wired for a flight response when trapped, is it?
No, it is not. When you corner a subterranean hunter, you are applying spatial pressure.
Okay.
In a tunnel, turning around to flee from a predator exposes your most vulnerable areas, your back, your neck. So generations of terriers were bred to respond to spatial pressure with an immediate mandatory fight response.
That makes total sense.
So when a child leans over a resting Westie or reaches into their dog bed, the dog's nervous system interprets that looming spatial pressure as a critical threat. The small size of the dog creates this catastrophic illusion for the parents.
They just assume a small dog is a resilient plush toy that will tolerate being manhandled.
Exactly.
It's such an unfair position to put the animal in. They're communicating a boundary in the exact language their genetics provided, and we punish them for not acting like a golden retriever.
Which is why providing a protected resting space, like a crate or a gated area where the dog is entirely off limits to the children, is a structural necessity. It's not a luxury.
Right. Now, this issue of crossed wires and misread instincts applies to other animals in the house, too. The notes touch on this really pervasive idea that if a dog seems destructive or bored, the solution is just to acquire a second dog to keep the first one entertained.
Oh, I see this all the time.
I look at that and think it's a recipe for disaster. You haven't solved the boredom. You've just provided an independent, high-energy terrier with a highly mobile, reactive toy to herd, nip, and compete with.
Exactly. It mathematically doubles your management load. You are now negotiating play styles, resource guarding around food, and territorial disputes, all on top of the original boredom you were trying to fix.
But the more nuanced interspecies dynamic brought up in the research is their relationship with cats.
Yes, the indoor versus outdoor cat dilemma.
The text notes that a Westie can coexist peacefully with an indoor cat. But I feel like people wildly misinterpret what that actually means. They think, oh, my dog loves my tabby cat, so his prey drive has been completely trained out of him.
That is a very dangerous assumption.
Because that's just context-dependent learning, right? The indoor cat is recognized as a permanent fixture of the den.
Yes, it is an established localized boundary. The dog has categorized that specific feline entity as part of the household inventory, essentially.
But that categorization is incredibly fragile, isn't it?
Highly fragile and highly specific. It absolutely does not generalize to the feline species as a whole.
So the moment an unfamiliar cat walks across the backyard fence,
The closed-loop prey sequence we discussed earlier is instantly activated. That trespassing cat is not a roommate, it is a target.
and this applies equally to rabbits, rodents, or reptiles outside too.
Exactly. The biological imperative to chase unfamiliar movement outdoors remains entirely intact, regardless of how lovingly they cuddle with the household cat on the sofa. Relying on hopeful supervision when those instincts are in play is just negligent.
Okay, so we've established that managing the dog's psychology and the household environment requires a literal masterclass in consistency. But I want to pivot to the physical maintenance of the animal, because this requires a concrete investment of time and money. Let's talk about the white coat trap.
Ah, the tuxedo.
Yes, because the Westie aesthetic is iconic, but the source material provides a harsh reality check. This dog was designed to dig in the mud, yet it wears a bright white tuxedo.
It really is an aesthetic paradox.
It is. Here's where it gets really interesting, though. The source is worn heavily against owners using whitening shampoos or harsh chemical treatments to keep the dog looking pristine.
It's a huge problem in the breed.
Initially, I assumed this was just a basic warning about avoiding chemical burns. But looking closer at the biological makeup of the breed, this is actually about the mechanical structure of their skin. Westies are genetically prone to epidermal barrier issues, aren't they?
They are heavily predisposed to conditions like Malassezia dermatitis.
Which is an overgrowth of yeast, right?
Right. And atopic dermatitis, which involves severe environmental allergies. The stratum corneum, the outermost layer of their skin, often has a compromised lipid barrier. Those natural oils are the only thing protecting their immune system from environmental allergens.
So when an owner vigorously scrubs them down with harsh whitening agents just to make them look like a show dog, They are actively stripping away that fragile lipid barrier.
You are creating microabrasions and completely destroying the skin's acidic pH balance. You are essentially dismantling their only armor against infections just to achieve a cosmetic ideal.
That's awful.
It is gentle, routine maintenance that prioritizes the health of the skin over the blinding whiteness of the coat is biologically imperative.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it really highlights the financial reality. Prospective owners look at a small dog and just assume a proportionally small vet bill.
Right. Less dog, less money.
Exactly. But if you are managing chronic skin conditions, buying specialized diets for allergies, treating recurring ear infections, which are super common when the skin barrier is compromised, those costs compound rapidly. You aren't just paying for a small bag of kibble. You need a dedicated line item in your budget for dermatological maintenance.
And those financial and time requirements evolve dramatically across the dog's life stages.
Walk us through that.
Well, the text traces this arc. Puppyhood requires intensive time investment for toilet training, bite inhibition, socialization, then adolescence hits. This is a period of severe boundary testing where the dog's adult hormones surge and they constantly challenge the consistency of the household.
And speaking of those life stages, I want to highlight an argument from the text that completely subverts modern dog culture. There's this pervasive cultural myth that puppies are blank slates.
Yes, the blank slate myth.
Everyone assumes that if you want a dog to fit perfectly into your specific life, you must buy an 8-week-old puppy and mold it from scratch. But the source material argues that adopting an adult or a senior rescue Westie actually provides significantly more data for a successful match.
The blank slate theory is just a fundamental misunderstanding of canine genetics.
How so?
A puppy's true behavioral and genetic predispositions, their specific level of prey drive, their reactivity, their underlying anxiety, those do not fully express themselves until sexual and structural maturity, which is usually between 1 and 2 years of age.
So when you bring home an 8-week-old puppy...
You are gambling on genetic expression. You literally do not know what you have yet.
Right. You don't know if you're getting the chill Westie or the hyper-vigilant neighborhood watch captain until it's too late, whereas an adult rescue dog is a known quantity.
Exactly. You can observe their fully formed adult temperament.
If you know your household is loud and chaotic, or if you know you lack the time for extensive daily training, getting an adult dog with the verified history of tolerating noise is a much safer, more pragmatic choice.
It challenges the ego of the owner, frankly. We like to think we can nurture any dog into our ideal companion, but honoring the genetic reality of an adult dog is often far more humane and successful.
I love that framing. It really feels like this entire deep dive has been about systematically tearing down a specific set of illusions. People look at the small size and assume low maintenance.
Right.
They look at a house with a garden and assume, I don't need to walk it. They see a cat in the house and assume the prey drive is gone. The sources actually isolate 4 major myths that trap new owners, and I think we've organically dismantled 3 of them already.
We have. The myth that small equates to easy is debunked by their energy density and their need for cognitive engagement. The myth that a yard replaces a walk is debunked by the mechanics of olfactory deprivation and all those resulting destructive behaviors.
The sandbox negotiation.
Exactly. And the myth that an indoor cat cures the prey drive is debunked by understanding context-dependent learning versus fixed action patterns.
But there is a 4th myth in the text that we haven't touched on yet, and it honestly might be the most insidious one. Myth number 4. A cheerful expression guarantees the dog is comfortable and pain-free.
This is such a critical observation.
This goes back to what you were saying with that stoicism, right?
It does. A Westie's facial structure, the erect ears, the bright eyes, the naturally high carriage of the tail, it gives them this permanent posture of attentive cheerfulness.
They just look happy all the time.
But we have to remember their working heritage. In the wild or underground hunting a dangerous predator, masking injury or weakness is a vital survival trait.
Because showing pain makes you a target.
Exactly. So they're biologically programmed to hide chronic pain. They can be suffering from severe dental disease, chronic osteoarthritis, or deep-seated skin infections, and they will still carry their tail high and trot to the door when the doorbell rings. Their bright expression is an anatomical default, not a medical diagnostic. This raises an important question for owners about how closely they're actually watching their dogs.
Because you can't rely on them whining.
Right. It requires a profoundly observant owner to notice the micro changes in behavior. You know, A slight hesitation before jumping on the sofa, a change in how they chew their kibble, a subtle shift in their sleep patterns. Those are the things that actually signal distress.
That is heavy. It forces you to realize that you can't just passively own this breed. You have to actively study them, which honestly brings this whole narrative full circle. Let's go back to that Saturday morning scene we started with.
The delivery truck.
Yes, the delivery truck has passed. The paws are now being dried from the garden mud because we know that white coat is an absolute magnet for it.
Mm.
Breakfast has been carefully measured out. Maybe it's a specialized formula for sensitive skin.
Good routine.
And that stolen sock. It was traded calmly for a high-value treat, ensuring we aren't creating that slot machine dynamic we talked about.
Mm.
The dog is now settled on her bed, a safe space where the kids know not to corner her, but her ears are still independently swiveling, monitoring the perimeter.
Doing her job.
Doing her job. The routine isn't effortless, but it is sustainable. The behavior makes sense to everyone because the humans finally understand the underlying mechanics of the animal. They aren't fighting the terrier. They are framing it.
They have achieved harmony through structure. When an owner finally understands the evolutionary why behind the behavior, the daily management stops feeling like a frustrating chore. It transforms into the framework for a deeply respectful, rewarding relationship.
So what does this all mean? Well, that is the ultimate takeaway for you today. Living successfully with a Westie, or honestly, navigating any major relational commitment in life, isn't about forcing an aesthetic ideal into existence. It is about building realistic, sustainable routines that actually honor the biological and psychological reality of the situation.
I think there is a broader, perhaps more philosophical point we can draw from that fourth myth we discussed. We learned today that a Westie's famously cheerful expression, their anatomical posture of happiness, can actually mask profound underlying pain.
Yeah.
It tricks the casual observer into assuming everything is fine simply because the subject looks engaged. It forces you to wonder, how often do we make that exact same misjudgment about the people in our own lives? How often do we assume that a competent posture and a bright smile mean a person doesn't desperately need our careful, observant attention and support?
Man, that is a profound thought to hold on to. We spend so much time looking at the surface, we forget to investigate the mechanics underneath. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning, keep exploring, and remember to always look beneath the surface. We'll catch you next time.